আন্তর্জাতিক ওয়েবিনার। আমরা সরাসরি চলে যাচ্ছি অনুষ্ঠানে।
Good morning, London, Oslo, and New York. Good afternoon, Dhaka, and good evening, Melbourne. Let me pay my respect to the martyrs of 1952 language movement and the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War and the father of the nation, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Incidentally, Bangladesh is celebrating the birth centenary of its father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, this year. I pay rich tribute to the great leader who outlined Bangladesh's friendly foreign policy 5 decades back that his daughter has been pursuing. In the 50th celebration of independence, Bangladesh has achieved remarkable socio-economic development. In the decade up to 2019, the progress of Bangladesh has been described as remarkable, achieving 188% economic growth and a significant reduction in poverty, whilst integrating the policies of inclusion as a development priority. Bangladesh's economic growth and social development goals, underpinned by social justice and progressive policies, have supported Bangladesh's achievement around the SDGs. Besides, Bangladesh has effectively demonstrated the importance of multilateralism by engaging development partners to contribute to both the identification and redress of its development challenge. In today's webinar, 50 years of Bangladesh economy, society, people, and leadership, speakers are going to present an assessment of Bangladesh's achievement and challenges. We might usefully reflect that the past 50 years has also witnessed shift in political and social concern around the characteristics of development and their broader impacts. Distinguished scholars from Australia, Europe, USA, and Asia will briefly present their views. Keynote speakers attribute Bangladesh's development to its social organization within the economy on 3 major dimensions, noting the significance of alignment of these dimensions in achieving development objectives. A, sustainable development through a people-centered development approach guided by and aligned with global SDG objectives. B, the agricultural revolution and small business activities. And finally, the geopolitical balance around multilateral partnership. The discussion will explore and the claim that macroeconomic success is based on the integrated economic, social, political, and environmental plan for economic development and social well-being that leaves no one behind. This webinar is jointly organized by Bangladesh Research Institute, BRI Australia, and the International Affairs Subcommittee of Bangladesh Awami League. I am Dr. Mohsin Habib from Swinburne University of Technology Australia and Bangladesh Research Institute, who will be your host and facilitator for this international webinar. Now, let me invite Dr. Shammi Ahmed, International Affairs Secretary, Bangladesh Awami League, to deliver her welcome speech. Dr. Shammi holds a PhD in disaster management and gender policy and has served in senior roles for International Red Cross and Red Crescent Society. Dr. Shammi, please.
Thank you, Mr. Habib. Fellow colleagues, respected guests, and those who are watching us via electronic and social media, a very good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of the International Affairs Subcommittee of Bangladesh Awami League, I welcome you all to this special webinar on 50 years of Bangladesh, economy, society, people, and leadership. I'm pleased to have with us as keynote speaker, Dr. Diane Bolton, Dr. Eirik Johnson, and Dr. Andres Kaur, and as moderator, Dr. Atiur Rahman, an educationist and ex-governor Bangladesh Bank. Thank you all for joining us today. In today's webinar, we would like to highlight the journey of Bangladesh since its liberation in the year 1971 and the hurdles a new independent Bangladesh has overcome to reach today's successes. Although I can foresee that we have many more milestones still to achieve in the near future, the socio-economic achievement of this young country within such a short period of time is commendable and well recognized by the rest of the world. Not only in Bangladesh GDP, one of the highest in the South Asian region, despite the current pandemic, I am happily emphasize the prosperity, hard work, and spirit of the people of this country under the capable leadership of Sheikh Hasina. The emerging Bangladesh has become a role model for continuing economic and social improvement. In 2015, Bangladesh was finally labeled as a lower middle income country. In 2018, for the first time, Bangladesh fulfilled all three eligibility criteria to be excluded from the UN's least developed countries list. Today, we can be proud of the remarkable success the country has achieved in relation to the Millennium Development Goals. Bangladesh has continued to witness growth and expansion in industrial export, remittances, and agricultural production. We are now the world's second largest apparel exporter after China and the fifth largest recipient of cash remittances from all over the world. The garment sector is the largest contributor to the Bangladesh economy and employs about 4 million people, of whom 75% are women. From the mid-1970s to the mid-1980s, the country relied heavily on foreign aid, which accounted for 90% of its budget. The economic condition during that period is highlighted in the study by Dr. S.R. Osmani, Professor of Development Economics at the University of Ulster, in his article entitled The Food Problem of Bangladesh. The study stated that 76% of the rural communities of Bangladesh were unable to consume enough calories. Furthermore, an average rural household used to spend around 80% of its budget merely on food. I am glad to mention here that in our current budget, this foreign support is reduced to below 15% in spite of our huge investment for infrastructure development. Today, Bangladesh is a success story and labeled as Asian Tiger, which is a testament of our achievements. Our GDP growth has remained around 7% for the past 12 years, while the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics has reported 5.24% growth in fiscal year 2019-20 despite the pandemic. Having satisfied the LDC status signifies that a country's per capita gross national income, human assets, and resilience to economic and environmental progresses are robust enough to enable sustainable development. In addition, the IT industry's success is central to the digital transformation and ongoing economic growth of Bangladesh. The dynamic leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, supported by the people of Bangladesh, has been successful in fulfilling the dream of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, by making the vision of Sonar Bangla. As a liberal and responsible citizen of Bangladesh, I am proud of our achievement. We appreciate our current and versatile aspect of development. A resilient nation like ours, under the current leadership, will only withstand but also overcome the adverse impact of calamities by continuing to focus on economic and social prosperity. Thank you all once again for joining us today. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu, Joy Sheikh Hasina, long live Bangladesh. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Really appreciate. Now we will hear from our invited speaker. Please let me invite our first speaker, Professor Diane Bolton, who has completed her PhD in social science with an interdisciplinary focus on the sociology, economics, and politics of development. Her interest in leadership of change and complexity is also supported by psychology and education degree. Originally from UK, her career in Australia has spanned senior policy role in Australian public services and senior academic roles in Swinburne University, Monash Mount Eliza Business School, and Mount Eliza UQ Business School. She has broad experience in advising around accreditation and regulation of higher education institution and consultants on quality assurance in higher education. She's an active researcher in sustainable development, leadership, management, CSR, and responsive regulatory frameworks in complex and shifting environment. Professor Diane Bolton, please.
Thank you very much, Maishin. Foreign Minister, the Honourable A.K. Abdul Momen, the International Affairs Committee of the Bangladeshi Awami League, Bangladesh Research Institute, Dr. Mohsin Habib, distinguished guests, and our wider audience. I'm delighted to contribute to this forum on the achievements of Bangladesh as it approaches the 50th anniversary of its independence. I remember Bangladesh's independence being reported in the UK, both the human cost and sacrifice and its development struggles against a background of Cold War politics. 50 years later, some of these tensions between superpowers remain. Dr. Kaur will speak to some of these later. However, this period has also witnessed significant shifts in thinking about development opportunities, and I will touch on some of these today. When I was invited to speak on the role of governance and leadership in Bangladesh's achievements, a dominant theme appeared to be its with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. SDGs have been seen by both academics and practitioners as rejuvenating the debate around development strategy for nation states. So today I want to consider not only Bangladesh's achievements against SDGs, but also their influence on national development goals and the building of integrated capability for implementing them. So as background to my comments today, I'll make the following assertions. First, UN activity in 2015 was a turning point for rethinking development strategies. It witnessed the replacement of the Millennium Goals with the SDGs, the adoption of the Paris Climate Agreement, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing for Development, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. These dynamic agendas illustrated the integrated and unpredictable nature of global challenges for development planning. Second, Bangladesh's integration of equity principles into its development planning and its commitment to leaving nobody behind is allied with SDGs. An important consideration currently is the prediction by the World Bank that COVID will increase extreme poverty globally from an anticipated 7.9% to over 9% in 2020. Third, acknowledgement of SDGs across development partners is to some extent bridging politics and ideologies concerning the need for consistency and collaboration in achieving global, national, and local SDGs. The COVID pandemic has undoubtedly had a drastic impact on Bangladesh's economy, as many others. But this should not shroud Bangladesh's achievements to date, which have made it better placed than many nations to meet these challenges. Chomsky reminds us that looming catastrophes cannot displace our day-to-day efforts towards addressing social justice agendas. In September, the Honourable Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, noted the speedy response of a government stimulus package equivalent to over 4% of GDP. She also called on the United Nations to play a catalytic role in using its 2015 agendas as a coordinated roadmap to overcome this crisis. I shall now focus on Bangladesh's achievements within the SDG framework and identify a couple of tensions in its meeting both equity and growth goals. Over the last half century, global turbulence has fostered a more pragmatic and potentially less ideological approach to development, reflecting multilateral pathways to more integrated economic, social, and environmental agendas. Even in developed nations, populist prescriptions for economic growth are increasingly challenged by the transparent and complex global realities. The 1987 Brundtland Report noted that finding sustainable development paths required a renewed search for multilateral solutions to the downward spiral of economic, social, and ecological decline that was trapping poorer nations and also affecting sustainable development paths globally. It urged nations to recognise that sustainable development required combining the ideals of economic security, ecological integrity, and social equity, which had often been seen as contradictory. However, certain tensions were also foreshadowed. For example, new forms of collaboration are required around emergent problem sets as an antidote to self-serving technocratic solutions, often presented as unchallengeable to individual nations. I draw on these developments today in celebrating Bangladesh's achievements, described by some as a development miracle. It's widely recognized, but often understated, that governance capability to develop in a manner consistent with both its political and social objectives requires acumen and skill. But often the focus on the major gaps and challenges associated with governance reform can obscure achievements. This shouldn't happen today, as the achievements of the government and its leadership have demonstrated effective adaptation of the SDGs in setting and achieving targets and making transparent its future development agendas. I heartily congratulate the Bangladesh government and its leadership on these outcomes. At the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly in 2019, the Honourable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina noted the previous decade of expansion in GDP of 188%, but importantly, she also emphasised that poverty eradication and addressing inequality were integral to Bangladesh's development, as was an integrated approach to the protection of the environment, gender parity in education, enhanced educational quality, and population-wide health coverage. Specifically, the Honourable Prime Minister emphasised that multilateralism remains as the strongest panacea for resolving global problems and creating global goods. Bangladesh's 7th five-year plan integrated SDGs, aligning political and economic targets with moral and ethical prescriptions. At a local level, it adopted a whole-of-society approach to government machinery, NGOs, INGOs, CSOs, development partners, the private sector, academia, professionals, local authorities, and parliamentarians in assisting targeted use of resources locally. Government machinery aligned SDG agendas across ministries and divisions, harmonising support for integrated assessment and financing strategies. Shortly, Dr. Jensen will be elaborating on how this approach assisted agricultural reform. Nevertheless, Bangladesh's UN Voluntary National Review in 2020 recognised that the aspiration of leaving no one behind still requires attention. It requires further transformation of deeply rooted governance structures and business models, enhanced macroeconomic and fiscal instruments that promote inclusive growth, and integrated social policy that achieves universal coverage and redresses the needs of the most vulnerable. Thus, I conclude that the United Nations Agenda 2030 will continue to play a key role in framing and monitoring Bangladesh's development pathway, embedding social equity objectives identified at independence. However, extending SDGs beyond 2030 also requires enhanced management of tensions between economic development and social equity goals. So to illustrate this, I'll focus on SDG 1, which is about ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. Bangladesh's reduction of poverty and achievement of economic growth, as reported to the UN, required aligning and sustaining tensions while simultaneously increasing labour productivity, farm income, access to production inputs and finance, employment opportunities in lagging regions, women's participation in the labour force, overseas employment and access to quality education, health and nutrition. Strengthening social protection programmes, stabilising food prices, and mitigating adverse consequences of climate change were all part of the complex poverty reduction programme. Future tensions identified in the 2020 VNR also include changes in the conditions of aid for developing countries, technological innovation, making lower skilled, cheaper labour less attractive to investors, climate volatility, and political instability associated with the Rohingya refugee problem, and of course, recovery from COVID. Tensions will also continue around implementation of reform agendas. For example, the National Social Security Strategy aims to prioritise the most vulnerable, but already is being criticised for primarily benefiting the non-poor. Thus, in relation to governance and leadership, a major political challenge is to hold and explain these tensions. Claiming that they can be resolved easily merely provides opportunities for non-productive politicisation of key problems. I'll conclude by raising two examples of such tensions. SDG 4 includes lifelong learning for access to productive jobs in the economy as well as labour market access for the poor. The shipbreaking industry in Bangladesh presents both opportunities for employment for recycling and yet produces negative externalities associated with its beaching deconstruction methods, sometimes lacking adequate protection for workers and the environment. But Bangladesh has taken multilateral action to both reform and preserve the industry. It's implemented regulation and legislation in accordance with international reform agendas, but maintaining a balance between preserving employment opportunities and increasing worker and environmental protection requires ongoing collaboration between government, regulators, the private sector, and CSOs to leverage market opportunities in a pro-social manner. In accord with SDG 17, this highlights the importance of partnership for sustainable development. SDG 4 also concerns education and human capital production. Although remarkable progress has been made in expanding primary education, tensions still surround higher education's contribution to development. Prior strategies recognized increasing demand for higher education, but they left private providers to meet a significant portion of this demand. So how does Bangladesh develop a human capital base that's relevant to its development needs when globally higher educators themselves are transforming so rapidly? Whereas in developed nations, marketization has generally developed within a highly regulated higher education system, this isn't the case in Bangladesh, where a highly marketized sector, characterized by tensions between quality and profitability, is developing at the same time as a regulatory framework. Developing a responsive regulatory framework will again require collaboration between both public and private stakeholders, agreeing on mutual value in the setting and complying with standards in order to obtain a social license to operate in the sector. So to conclude, in considering effectiveness of political governance and leadership in Bangladesh, its embedding of key SDGs within economic development policy has helped set and achieve inclusive and measurable development around sustainable development goals, including ensuring that containing the COVID pandemic and Agenda 2030 will go hand in hand, to which the Honourable Prime Minister has recently referred. Importantly for Bangladesh post-2015, the World Bank Group committed to a more strategic and systematic approach to working with client countries to deliver on SDGs through finance data provision and, importantly, supporting country-led and country-owned policies to attain the SDGs. Harmonisation across development partners was illustrated by its Vice President for Equitable Growth, Finance and Institutions, highlighting the potential contribution of China's Belt and Road Initiative, along with other initiatives, to speed up poverty reduction and enhance trade if accompanied by institutional reform. Bangladesh's leadership has a tradition of leveraging benefit from converging mindsets around global agendas. It's proved this by its achievements to date. The complexity of the global environment will further test political leadership of Bangladesh to hold these complex tensions while continuing to achieve development and equity goals simultaneously. However, in turbulent times, I would argue adherence to the SDG framework can still help make transparent the government's planning rationale and the range of benefits for citizens in achieving sustainable development that aims to ensure that none are left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Di, for your perspectives, which frame the theme of the importance of multilateralism derived from SDGs and embedded across portfolios. Let me acknowledge one special guest in the room, Mr. Kabrul H. Tarafdar. He's the President and CEO of ASA Philippine Foundation. So he's joining us from the Philippines. So our next speaker, Dr. Eirik Johnson, has long and in-depth experience in working in Bangladesh. Eirik has a PhD in social anthropology from University of Oslo. He has worked as a research and development aid administrator in Bangladesh for many years. He has written several books about the country. He will talk about some of the economic and social change that has occurred in the village where he studied in Bangladesh in the late 1979, and again from 2010 to 2016. His latest book, Seeing the End of Poverty, Bhayamara Revisited, published by University Press at Dhaka. Eirik, please. Eirik, you need to unmute, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Eirik, thank you.
Foreign Minister, Honorable A.K. Abdul Momen, the International Affairs Committee of the Bangladesh Awami League, Bangladesh Research Institute, and Professor Mohsin Habib. In 1971, Bangladesh was one of the poorest countries in the world. What are the reasons for the strong economic growth in Bangladesh during the last 15 to 20 years, which have benefited the majority of the population? This is the topic I will address. But first, I will talk about the poverty situation in Bangladesh in the late 1970s. And then I will talk about the current situation. Now, from 1976 to 1980, more than 40 years ago, I worked as a visiting research fellow at Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies in Dhaka. And there I participated in a major national poverty study which BIDS carried out. I was a social anthropologist and did fieldwork in a typical village for months at a time over a 4-year period. Most of the people in the village at that time were desperately poor, and they depended largely on employment and income from agriculture. And this was also the case in most of the 60,000 villages of Bangladesh at that time. The agricultural sector in Bangladesh was characterized in the 1970s by simple technology and a very low output. And there were few jobs outside agriculture. And the unemployment and underemployment rate was very high. In the 1970s, the World Bank estimated that 80% of the population of Bangladesh lived below the poverty line. What characterized the poverty situation in the country more than 40 years ago? I saw poverty daily in the village where I lived. The main manifestation of poverty for people was lack of food. Many poor families only ate 1 or 2 meals a day for long periods of the year. The nutritional situation was very bad, and many people became weak and ill. Child mortality was high, and life expectancy short. And one did not have to look far to find other evidence of deep poverty. Many people did not have access to clean water, and the sanitary conditions were miserable. The public health service in the village did not operate, and almost no girls attended the primary school, and the school was often closed. Now, among the developing countries in Asia and Africa, Bangladesh was among the countries that scored lowest on all the development indicators. The Bangladesh government and the international aid organizations were very pessimistic about the future for the country. I wrote a book about my work in Bangladesh with BIDS, which is named Rural Bangladesh Competition for Scarce Resources, on the basis of my fieldwork in the late 70s. And this book was very pessimistic about the future of Bangladesh. And at the same time, in the early 1980s, many books were published on the development of Bangladesh. And almost all books dealing with rural development and village studies were pessimistic about the future. Now, after many years of absence from Bangladesh, I returned to the country in 2009. And I visited the same village I had lived in during the late 1970s. And I was so happy to see sort of the great progress which had occurred in the village. And it came as a big surprise for me. So I decided that I wanted to go back to the village and do a restudy to find out what really had happened with the people I knew very well, the families I had interviewed for many years. So I conducted fieldwork in the village between 2010 and 2016. I spent a month there every winter and talked to the people I knew. Now, many of the old people I knew and grown-up people I knew, they had died in the meantime. But I talked to their children, and the children knew me very well. And all families in the village enjoyed a much higher standard of living. That was easy to see. Now, I've written about this also in my latest book, calling Seeing the End of Poverty, with a question mark, Weimar Revisited. One reason for the improved situation was that a green revolution had taken place in agriculture and that the production had more than doubled. The daily wage for an agriculture worker had increased by about 10 times since the late 1970s, and nobody starved anymore in the village. And the increased material living standard in the village was easy to observe. The houses that people lived in were built with aluminium sheets or brick, not bamboo and straw as before. The village had received electricity, and all the families in the village were connected. Half of the families had bought television sets by 2010, and almost everyone had a radio and a mobile phone. Many families had their own water pump, and the sanitary conditions were much improved. Not at least, many of the people in the village benefited from the new job opportunities that had been created outside agriculture. 1/3 of the men in the village worked or had worked in the Middle East and sent money back to their families. I also saw that many young women in the village worked in the textile industry. They also sent money back to their families. The public education and health system in the village had improved very much. A new school, very nice new school, had been built in the village. All children, boys and girls, attended primary school, and many continued to secondary school. Now, after I came back in 2010, then I could see every morning the roads in the village were full of young girls in fine school uniforms and with books under their arms. And this was quite an unthinkable sight 40 years ago. Health professionals visited the village regularly. All children had received a vaccination book. One nurse told us that 80% of the young married couples in the village used family planning methods. And both BRAC and Grameen Bank were active in the village. So these are findings from the village study. And then one can easily ask sort of, to what extent is this village representative for other villages? And now there are about 88,000 villages in Bangladesh. And I think when you look at all national statistics, they confirm that the changes which I saw in this village, in Baimara village, had also sort of taken place in many of the other villages in Bangladesh. The Green Revolution, for instance, has taken place across all over the country. And the total rice production in the 1970s was about 12 million tons of rice. And today it's more than 36 million tons of rice. The daily wages in agriculture have increased many times. And most people all over Bangladesh eat 3 meals a day throughout the year. And millions of people are employed in the textile industry, especially women. And today, about 10 million people, mostly young men, are migrant workers and send back about 15 billion US dollars to their families every year. The life expectancy in Bangladesh has increased from 59 years to 72 years over a 40-year period. Now women give birth to an average of 2.2 children compared to 6 children in the 1970s. Almost all children are vaccinated and all go to school. Bangladesh has reached most of the Millennium Development Goals set by the United Nations. Infrastructure has improved across the country. Huge bridges and roads link the country together, and Bangladesh has become a large construction site. No other developing countries has given the voluntary organizations so much room for action. The large NGOs, Grameen Bank and BRAC, implement their development programs in most of the 88,000 villages in the country. And 20 million women participate in microcredit programs. Now, what is the reason why Bangladesh has succeeded in its development over the last decades? Of course, there are many reasons. Many would argue that an important reason is that the country has been integrated into the international labor market, and that the international companies are now investing in the country and creating millions of jobs for poor people. Another reason is that the most important development actors, the government of Bangladesh, the NGOs, and the international donors, have managed to cooperate well. Now, is the development in Bangladesh a sunshine history? I think to a large extent it is. But of course, Bangladesh still have challenges. The World Bank has estimated that in 2019, still 9% of the population, about 15 million people, live in extreme poverty. And also many million people live close to the poverty line. Bangladesh is also facing other challenges. The country is located in the world's largest delta region and is already strongly affected by climate change. Corruption is also a challenge. It's still widespread and at many levels. There are also challenges concerning human rights violations. But as I've said, Bangladesh have really achieved a great economic and social transformation during the last decades. And this is what I write very much about in this book here on seeing the end of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Eirik, for so clearly illustrating the importance of empowerment of local voluntary organization in achieving significant agricultural reform. It's a lived experience, so important to achieve socio-economic development. Now, our next speaker, I would like to invite Dr. Anders Kaur. He will be talking about Bangladesh's foreign policy, complex interaction, and competing interest of three superpowers. Dr. Anders was educated in Yale and Harvard and founded Core Analytics to provide strategic analysis of international politics. He is a publisher of the Journal of Political Risk, which works with a wide variety of authors from Ivy League professors to Filipino peasants. His areas of expertise include quantitative analysis, public opinion, and international security. He has written a book on land movements and edited a book on South China Sea. His analysis frequently appears in media, including Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, BBC, Fox, Bloomberg, Al Jazeera, Japan Times, South China Morning Post, and Straits Times. I'll welcome Dr. Anders to deliver his talk.
Thank you, Mohsen. Assalamu alaikum. Foreign Minister, Honorable A.K. Abdul Momin, the International Affairs Committee of the Bangladesh Awami League, Bangladesh Research Institute, Professor Mohsen Habib, distinguished guests, media partners, including DBC, and listeners, what an honor to address you today. In this talk and in the spirit of cooperation, and as an American, I want especially to identify opportunities for the US and the West to be a better friend and development partner to Bangladesh. There is a saying, when the elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. Before and after 1971, elephants like the British Empire and the US and Soviet Union during the Cold War trampled through Bangladesh. Today it is the US, Europe, China, and India, but a new day is dawning. The Honorable Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, has in her most recent UN address followed Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in supporting world peace and justice and an end to exploitation, deprivation, and oppression. The Prime Minister firmly supports world peace, solidarity, multilateralism, democracy, and human rights. She has said that, quote, friendship to all and malice to none is the fundamental principle of Bangladesh foreign policy. Bangladesh's growing economy is giving this message greater strength worldwide. Dr. Eirik Johnson has watched economic growth at the village level from 1976 to the present. As Professor Diane Bolton noted, Bangladesh is a development miracle with 188% GDP growth in the past decade. Where we may disagree is on the effect of China's Belt and Road. I see it as closer to mercantilism than to international development. While the US and Bangladesh have been on opposite sides in the past, the world's geopolitical architecture has fundamentally reversed with China's rise, its reach for hegemonic power, and the consequent US-India defense pact signed this week. It would not be inconsistent with multilateralism for Bangladesh, as India has done, to draw closer to those countries that are best positioned to protect democracy and human rights on a global scale, namely the US, Europe, India, and their allies. In return, these countries should treat Bangladesh as an equal partner, respect its religious and cultural traditions, and in particular should improve relations on 4 levels. First, respect and defend Bangladesh water rights. Second, support Bangladesh on the Rohingya issue. Third, increase trade, investment, and development funding to Bangladesh. And fourth, rapidly increase funding to mitigate the effects on Bangladesh of climate change. First, on water, the US and allies should do more to highlight Bangladesh water rights upon which China and India are intruding. India has dammed the Teesta River, and in response, and due to increasing cyclones and monsoon flooding that displaced millions, Foreign Minister A.K. Abdul Momen is rightly negotiating for a fair water deal on 7 transboundary rivers with India. China is threatening the Brahmaputra River, which it could use for hydro energy to strengthen flow in the Yellow River, or to divert water to its arid Xinjiang autonomous region. China already has the Zangmu Dam on the Brahmaputra and has plans for 3 more hydroelectric dams that will cause evaporation of water during the dry season. But some in Bangladesh are seeking a Chinese loan for $983 million US dollars to pay a Chinese company for river management on the Bangladesh side of the Indian border. Bangladesh needs river management, and the US and allies should step in with the necessary loan to enable local Bangladesh river management companies to take the lead. The international community should support and enforce international law, namely that upstream countries should not be allowed to decrease flows to downstream country people who have depended on those flows for centuries. Second, on the Rohingya crisis, the US, EU, India, and allies must work harder to help return the 1.1 million Rohingya refugees who fled across the border from Myanmar. The Honorable Foreign Minister, A.K. Abdul Momen, has obtained the strong cooperation of, most recently, Canada and the Netherlands on the Rohingya. He diligently lobbies all countries, including ASEAN, Thailand, Philippines, and Japan this month, for strong support of the voluntary, early, and dignified Rohingya return. As Professor Mohsin Habib has found, Myanmar's military action resulted in the murder of 25,000 Rohingyas and rape of 19,000. Myanmar and China promised Bangladesh endless cheap talk, negotiations in Beijing, where China has the home advantage, and Rohingya repatriation at a rate that would take decades to complete. Time is on Myanmar's side, and along with China, it is apparently trying to use refugees as a weapon to destabilize Bangladesh while clearing Rakhine State for internal colonization and hydrocarbon exploitation. For this, Professor Habib rightly estimates that Myanmar owes compensation of 5.4 billion US dollars. The international community should follow Bangladesh's lead in taking Myanmar to the ICC and additionally imposing economic sanctions until Myanmar accepts the voluntary and dignified return of the Rohingya. Third, on trade and development aid, the EU has been Bangladesh's biggest friend if measured by the balance of trade, which is net Bangladesh exports and development grants. Bangladesh has net exports to the EU of about 16 billion US dollars per year. The EU granted 8 billion to Bangladesh since 1971. The US has accounted for about 5 billion in positive annual trade balance for Bangladesh and 3 billion in grants. By these metrics, Europe has been a true friend of Bangladesh. To mitigate the Rohingya and COVID crises in Bangladesh, the US too has donated over $1.2 billion and recently delivered 100 ventilators. In 2018, China was a net exporter to Bangladesh. More specifically, Bangladeshis had to pay all the foreign exchange they got from the EU and more, a total of $17 billion, to China for Chinese imports. That money could instead be used to develop Bangladeshi businesses and jobs in Bangladesh or support other countries that value democracy and human rights, as does Bangladesh. If that principle were applied globally, the flow of new investment would bypass China and go to tolerant and democratic countries like Bangladesh. China and India could bring trade into balance if they remove their non-tariff barriers. Today, Bangladesh imports most of its arms from China and Russia. China sold over 1.6 billion worth of weapons to Bangladesh between 2015 and 2019, about 74% of all Bangladesh arms imports. Military dependency on Chinese and Russian imports could give them significant influence, drawing Bangladesh away from its democratic friends over time. Industrialized democracies can and must join Bangladesh by subsidizing and tailoring their exports to Bangladeshi needs, removing the incentive for Bangladesh to resort to other countries. Fourth, on climate change, China, the US, and the EU must limit greenhouse gas emissions that are causing a sea rise and massive flooding of scarce Bangladesh arable land. During rainwater floods in July, an estimated 24 to 37% of the country was submerged. Millions were displaced, a cost that should be borne by industrialized countries most responsible for greenhouse gases. China is responsible for 27% of all greenhouse gas emissions, and the US has the highest per capita level of greenhouse gas emissions of the big emitters. The 2015 Climate Change Accord promised $100 billion US dollars annually in aid to poor countries that bear the brunt of climate change. As the Honorable Prime Minister argues, that money should be paid immediately to mitigate the already mounting costs to countries like Bangladesh. To conclude, in the complex and ever-changing geopolitical landscape, Bangladesh and superpowers like the US, EU, and India must form a new and equal partnership for broader economic exchange, development, and a stable South Asia. Thank you for the honor of presenting today to such a distinguished audience. Donabad.
Thank you very much, Andres, for presenting your insights concerning Bangladesh's significance to the US and your suggestion on how this interest could be could play a greater part of US support. Now, let us quickly move on to the next session because we're running out of time. So the next session, we have two discussants, and we will invite our first discussant, Dr. Atiur Rahman. He's known as Poor People's Economist and Green Governor. Professor Atiur Rahman is a many-time awarded, central bank governor with a human face. He went to SWAS, University of London, as late as the 1970s and got his PhD in 1983. And I must mention that he was one of the distinguished professors invited to examine my PhD thesis 13 years back. Today, I can only highlight a few achievements from his very impressive long CV, sir. Thank you. And he's the best governor awarded, Asia Pacific. He's the central bank governor of the year of the year in 2015, winner of Gussie Peace Award from the Philippines, Indira Gandhi Gold Plaque, and many others. I'm not going to be able to continue this, but please let me invite Dr. Atiur Rahman to speak. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mohsin Habib, Honorable Foreign Minister, distinguished paper presenters, other participants, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me enough pleasure to participate in this webinar where policymakers, international thinkers, academics, and practitioners are participating. Indeed, Bangladesh's journey over the last 5 decades has indeed been an amazing one. Such discourse, on the one hand, gives us an opportunity to evaluate the achievements in an objective manner, and on the other hand, helps us in further understanding the challenges and opportunities that we need to focus. I consider this to be an especially opportune moment as we are observing the birth centenary of our beloved father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who envisioned Bangladesh and led the process of materialization of the dream. At the same time, we are also going to celebrate the golden jubilee of the birth of Bangladesh. We have already heard 3 papers from the 3 globally acclaimed thinkers and practitioners. The first, Ms. Diana Bolton, in her paper, has conceptualized Bangladesh's development path with special focus on the country's performance in terms of attaining the SDGs. She has pointed out how the international communities of the SDGs have been integrated into the political and economic aspirations of Bangladesh, along with the moral and ethical prescription. This discussion will be especially useful in understanding the extent of inclusiveness that has been built into the overall development approach of Bangladesh and adhered to by the stakeholders, government and non-governments alike. Voluntary national reporting, as she mentioned about, has already been presented and gives the results-based monitoring of SDGs and also highlights the challenges. She too has highlighted some of the tensions, which I think are the challenges, and we should focus on them. Climate change has been particularly addressed by all the presenters, and I thought 2015 Paris Climate Agreement was a moral compact for the whole world, and we were almost moving in that direction. But suddenly this pandemic came in and really created a lot of challenges for that happen. But even then, our Prime Minister, who is the champion of the earth, has been pushing hard on the adaptation issue and climate change issues, and she is now the global voice of the deprived for the climate change. While there has been significant rural to urban transformation in Bangladesh, still most of the Bangladesh population, nearly 65%, are residing in the rural areas and are relying on rural economy. Hence, grasping the socio-economic transformation in rural Bangladesh is pivotal in understanding and learning from the development experiences of Bangladesh. This is where the second paper by Dr. Eric Jensen comes in. And he's a good friend of mine. We have worked together in BI days. I have been to his village in Manikganj, where he used to stay. And he has briefly yet precisely portrayed how the macroeconomic success of Bangladesh as an economy has been translated into improved living standards in rural areas of the country. And he has rightly highlighted some of the key achievements in terms of particularly the agricultural productivity and production, remittances, and how the rural-urban migration. So this is an excellent presentation that we heard. Finally, Dr. Andres Kaur, in his paper, has shed light on the complex interactions of Bangladesh with global political and economic powers. He has rightly gone beyond mapping the challenges of the competition in the global market and outlined the emerging opportunities of cooperation. Indeed, Bangladesh must focus on forming new and equal partnerships with the global actors in the complex and ever-changing geopolitical landscape. This is an area where His Excellency, the Ambassador Jamir, probably will focus, and our Foreign Minister will be also focused. Bangladesh, of course, is following the fundamental principles of foreign policy laid down by Bangabandhu, which Dr. Kaur has already mentioned about, which is anchored on friendship to all and malice to none. And equally, our Prime Minister has also been pushing that multilateralism, peace and justice in the foreign policy. And in addition, Bangladesh also follows open regionalism and keeping the national interest at the core. And I'm sure the foreign affairs experts will focus on them. Certainly, Bangladesh's story is still unfolding. It is yet to be told. It is a story of old flames and long dream. This is a dream of 50 years and a flame of 75 years. I remember in 1943, our father of the nation, seeing the Calcutta famine, Bengal famine of 1943, he said, "How could this happen in a country which was the seat of the Golden Bengal? You know, where one businessman in Murshidabad could buy the whole of London." So that was the country being put into such a crisis because of the war. And he was mentioning the country will celebrate its golden jubilee next year, where when we will celebrate our success story of rising to today's prosperity from literally yesterday's ashes. Our father of the nation started dreaming of a prosperous golden Bengal more than 75 years ago when he was still a student leader, as I said. Throughout his political career, he had struggles to ensure equity and justice for his people. And this struggle eventually led to the independence of the country. Whatever we are now watching is in fact the result of the independence. And we owe to the father of the nation and the freedom fighters for all this. He succeeded in instilling a fighting spirit into the minds of his people, and that ensured liberation of the country against all odds. At the beginning, Bangladesh was dumped as a basket case or a test case of development, Eric would know very well, by the international commentators. Yet, utilizing the indomitable fighting spirit of the hardworking and entrepreneurial people of Bangladesh, Bangabandhu led the country into the path of inclusive development within a very short period of time. His government rightly prioritized agricultural development, fostering entrepreneurship and human resource development. And the outcomes were visible within a very short period of time. By 1974, per capita income of Bangladesh rose to $273 and compared to $93 in 72. A stunning performance indeed, especially if one considers that the size of the economy in 1972 was only $8 billion with zero foreign reserve and entrepreneurship class missing. And you'll be happy to know under his daughter's leadership, we now have an economy of $300+ billion and is growing every day. Bangladesh, the train of inclusive development got derailed in 1975 as the father of the nation was snatched away from his people. However, after prolonged struggles and much sacrifice, the country got back on track in 1996 under the leadership of his daughter, our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She immediately restarted the journey of her father, prioritizing rural transformation and inclusive development. There was another hiccup in between 2001 and 2008, but Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina got back to lead the country in 2019. And since then has done a magnificent job in turning the society and economy of Bangladesh for the better under the slogan, Digital Bangladesh. As a result, Bangladesh has become an example of inclusive and sustainable development for the rest of the world. Thanks to enhanced digital connectivity, Mohsin, I can't hear you. Are you telling something? Okay. Thanks to the enhanced digital connectivity, financial inclusion, and extended social safety net programs over the last decade or so, Bangladesh per capita income has been rising at a faster pace compared to its neighbors. And by 2030, it is expected to be $5,700, surpassing India. In fact, it has already surpassed India this year, but this will continue. It will be a neck-to-neck fight for many in the coming years. The economy has already surpassed its Asian peers in terms of key macroeconomic indicators. It is the fastest growing economy, 8.15% last year. Inflation is under control, 5 to 6%. Public debt has remained low. Foreign debt is about 15 to 18%. And a very healthy foreign reserve has been maintained, $41 billion now. And for example, over the last decade, investment to GDP ratio has increased from 26% to 32%. And during the same period, foreign direct investment more than quadrupled, remittance increased 1.5 times, and export almost doubled. More importantly, the economic progress has been adequately translated into social progress in Bangladesh. Poverty has come down from 32% to 22% recently, and extreme poverty has come down from 20 to 11%. Of course, this pandemic has created some hurdles for us, and there may be some spike, but definitely we are on it, and we will be pushing our strategy to contain it. Fertility rate has reached an almost ideal situation, 2.1. Life expectancy has increased from 65 to 73 years, far ahead of the South Asian neighbors. Child mortality and maternal mortality have also been almost halved during the last decade or so. Transformation of agriculture has played a key role in not only the fast growth of our economy, but also to ensure resilience to shocks. 80 to 90% of our farmers today are using modern technology. Thanks to the prudent and consistent support provided by the government of Sheikh Hasina, we are now fourth in the world in producing food grain, third in producing vegetables, fourth in fisheries, and seventh in producing mangoes. Our food production index stands at 145.3. We are ahead of India, China, and Vietnam, and even in Argentina. This success in agriculture, on the one hand, has ensured supply of food and export earnings, and on the other hand, has contributed in bolstering domestic demand for goods and services in the rural areas. Steady performance of our exports and remittances have also played a driving force behind our macroeconomic success. Our export growth has been better than most other Asian countries. Remittance performance is also similarly better. Inflow of workers' remittance to rural Bangladesh has contributed to a vibrant rural non-farm economic base in the country. 60% of the rural economy really come from non-farm sources. And above all, good fiscal management has also contributed to macro stability and growth performance. Bangladesh macroeconomic stability has been stunning, anchored by good fiscal policy, and that continues to be the case. Despite our not so good performance on the revenue side, fiscal deficit and public debt have been contained well below what are considered sustainable. This development marathon must continue unabated, and we should remain focused on the dynamic shifts of our economy that are already in motion. We got to continue our policy support for easing the rules and regulations for both the entrepreneurs and the people who take the services. In fact, easing of business and governance services is itself a better stimulus than just pouring in money already. For that matter, we must remain supportive of the changes that are already taking place and may have been accelerating in the changed context. And I must mention the smart move which the government led by our Prime Minister and the central bank made in terms of easing the liquidity situation in the country through the 21 stimulus package, which is unprecedented, about 4% of the GDP. And even it is going on, even yesterday, $1 billion plus have been poured in through the stimulus package. This only could be possible because we had this robust reserve situation and also low debt GDP ratio, and as well as the the far side of the leader. Leadership matters here actually. You have to have the guts to take the decision at the right time in the right proportion, and that's what our leader has taken. And the country is now in the 8th fastest running country in the world, 4th in Asia, and the 1st in South Asia. And of course, there are challenges, as mentioned by most of the speakers, particularly our infrastructure deficit, and also our education and skills development in terms of revenue and diversification of exports. These are there, and we'll have to mention that. I will end by just pushing a few of the policy agendas that our government is already on, and we want them to continue. Firstly, we need to continue investing more in agriculture, which is now cereal plus, including horticulture, fisheries, poultry, and livestock. You won't believe it. The livestock has developed so much that rural, farms, the livestock farms are providing so much of employment. About 80% of our demand, we are really meeting from our own resources. This was not the case. In fact, our neighboring government, in fact, cracked down on the inflow of the livestock at our benefit, I would say. We have been doing so well now. Change energy mix in favor of renewables, if possible, by making more public investment in green energies. And as a champion of the earth, our government, our prime minister has been pushing, public finance, solar energies, and a number of projects are in the pipeline coming up. And we want to continue to support ICT infrastructures and encourage more related startups, our young entrepreneurs, the digital entrepreneurs. Finally, improve supply chains, both domestic, regional, and global, utilizing better inclusive diplomacy and digitization of customs and tax regulators. Improve revenue collection mechanism by enhancing the capacities of the human resources and further digitization, so that the tax GDP ratio demonstrate visible spike. It is still low. We are it is a bit unfortunate that it is going down. We should really go up. Focus on infrastructures as the force multiplier for growth. And government has been doing a number of mega projects she has already taken up. The government's prioritization on mega infrastructures, particularly the Padma Bridge, which is almost on site, metro rail, Matarbari Energy Hub, and special economic zones will emerge as the game changers in taking Bangladesh to a higher growth level by attracting more FDI and as well as domestic investment, which we may not have comprehended yet. We need to invest more on education, skilling, and reskilling of the human resources to prepare the country for the 4th industrial revolution, which is knocking at our doors. And of course, we must keep the macroeconomy highly liquid and stable, as we are doing now, remaining bold but cautious without becoming extra sensitive about growing fiscal deficit at this stage of the recovery. In fact, I heard our Prime Minister saying that we will go at any length to support the entrepreneurs, so that the employment are secured and Bangladesh moves on even in these difficult days. And of course, leadership matters. Both the leadership style of Bangabandhu and her father and her daughter really have been taking us forward, and we want to keep the momentum. Thank you so much for organizing this and allowing me to share my minds. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atir Rahman. It was almost a motivational speech. Thank you for your. I'll now like to invite our last discussant, Professor Masoudur Rahman, to discuss further on our keynote presenters. I'm saying my apologies because I could not keep the time. And thank you, Honorable Minister, for being with us for that long. I'll just not take more time. I'll just say Professor Masoudur Rahman is a emeritus professor in University of Nordland. We have been working together for several projects over the years. Thank you. I'll just over to you, Professor Masoudur Rahman.
Thank you, Honorable Foreign Minister and distinguished key presenters, keynote speakers, and audiences. And I must thank you for giving this opportunity to share some of my views. Though time limit, I will make it very short. And instead of, I had even longer list of success list here, but I don't want to repeat those. I just want to add something more that was, post-independent Bangladesh has achieved. Even with that, we can see not only that life expectancy has increased, it was in fact for the poor as well, because they were almost destined to the early. Child mortality has been reduced. Child labor has been reduced. Those are the things I want to really do. And the young generation, they have become more innovative. I found that some young generation where they find new avenues for their livelihood. They don't really want for getting a job because our labor market is too packed. Anyway, so what we found that in fact, to start with this, some sort of evaluation of achievement and some sort of the challenges. I mean, our keynote speakers have rightly pointed out and brought forward some of the very crucial points that Bangladesh has come across. And when Bangladesh had this challenge in the aftermath of the liberation war, it has to fight and get away with all this and it make a miracle. Well, I will not use the term miracle. I think it is the people. When I'm talking about the concept here, it was the Bangladesh and economy, society, leadership. In fact, it's all about people. Economy is for the people. Society is for the people. Leadership is also for the people. And it is the people that make the economy. They grow the economic growth. They want to change the desired social changes. So that's what I found, I mean, just make it very sure, I think at least our success stories can be on three major areas in all, like in agriculture, and then government sector, then remittances. So those are in fact added more to not only that, they make better life better, but it also contributed to the national economy. And also historically, we have seen the revisited a very important issue to see that comparing Bangladesh before and after. But it is also good to compare Bangladesh, pre-Bangladesh, pre-independent Bangladesh and post-independent Bangladesh, because that's what will make it more clear-cut, but what we have achieved, because independent Bangladesh had really achieved what it meant to be achieved before the liberation. I would, in fact, look at this some sort of all those. I would definitely agree with all those points brought forward by the key speakers, and but one major question I found that too much emphasis on the economic growth. Economic growth is important, but economic growth is not the panacea of development. It is, if the growth result may not be shared by everyone in the society, that will not really some sort of development, we have to say. So in order to make growth, and we also think about what we have achieved, we must move forward. In order to move forward, there are some challenges. We have to make some of the best resources we have, the demographic dividend. Bangladesh is one country, unlike many other developed countries, where developed countries, they have a major portion of people are elderly people, they're no more productive. Bangladesh has a productive working forces, underage. Bangladesh have a bright working future, and these young group, they will contribute, they expect to contribute. In order to make them contributive, and if they can contribute further, you have to provide the opportunities. Education is very important. Provide them with the skill, technological know-how. Not only that, providing the general education, that is also important, so that they can, in Bangladesh situation, we can find there's a mismatch of higher educated young people and labor market. Labor market cannot absorb the highly educated people, but they are also lacking. There's a crisis of skilled labor in the market. When Bangladesh also depend very much on remittances from outside, then also it is also we can send the skilled labor. they can work with dignity in outside the country. So education system needs one, that is one challenge. And then again, we have to think about more about, as everyone has highlighted, the importance of agriculture. Bangladesh had been always hundreds of thousands of years. It's a mainly agriculture product. That is the competitive advantage Bangladesh has. So I think more emphasis on small scale agriculture production, and that will contribute to the macroeconomy. So again, emphasis on the small is beautiful. Not only beautiful, but bountiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Masudur Rahman. Now we will hear from our chief guest, His Excellency Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, Honorable Minister of the Foreign Affairs, Bangladesh government, to comment on, amongst other issues, Bangladesh's multilateral approach to development, and particularly the role of foreign affairs. Professor Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen has a PhD in economics, MBA from Northeastern University, MPA from Public Administration, Public Policy and International Economics from Harvard University, and LLB in Law and MA in Development Economics. And at last, he had a BA honors from Dhaka University. He has been a successful academic, administrator, and diplomat. He worked as an economic advisor at the Saudi Industrial Development Fund under the Saudi Ministry of Finance and National Economy as an expert, and has worked in World Bank, United Nations Development Program, and so forth. So he was Bangladesh's permanent representative to the UN in New York. Today, I can only highlight a few achievements of his prolific, CV, an impressive CV. I'll just welcome Honorable Minister to deliver his talk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Maybe distinguished participants, scholars, researchers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start this lecture, I must thank these few, panelists and speakers, Professor Diane Bolton for her wonderful, and very encouraging speech. And I must say, Andrew Carr, and his new vision, his suggestion to gain from a group comprising USA, European Union, India, and Bangladesh, a very thought-provoking proposal. And of course, Dr. Eric Jensen, I had the privilege to read his book, Seeing the End of Poverty, by Dr. Eric Jensen and Najibur Rahman, the Veramara experience. It is a very enlightening and illuminating story. And I thought we should promote this book across all my missions, because it tells the truth, the fact that has been done over the years. And I had some relation with this type of observation, because I was kicked out of my own country and had to live abroad for almost 38 years. So after returning home after 38 years, I moved around the country and I found a miracle. The country had changed. A country which is known as bottomless basket with no hope of survival has become a land of opportunities, a vibrant economy. So I read your book very well, and I thought we should promote that book. And of course, my young friend, Atik, Dr. Atikur Rahman, I always like it, and particularly today, I really enjoyed his spirited deliberations. And also Professor Masudur Rahman, and he pointed out 3 areas which is very critical, I must say, correctly, raised those 3 areas. Anyway, I'm so glad I take apology today. But since Shammi told me I could not avoid, I had an accident day before yesterday. When I was in a tennis court, I fell down in a hard court and had some bump around. And so I was having difficulties, but yet I cannot, cannot get this privilege. And Shammi told me, I said, okay, I'll try to do it. More so because we live in a world virtual nowadays. This gives us an opportunity. As we come to Bangladesh's 50th celebration of independence, it is a pleasure to introduce a forum that is focused on both reviewing and celebrating our progress while also acknowledging our challenges into the future and opportunities for us to leverage the capability that we have built over the last half decade. I thank Dr. Shammi Ahmed and Dr. Mohsin Habib for organizing this very important event. And I would like that this deliberation should be promoted, and the book can be published on the basis of all the deliberations that have been presented today. And that would be useful because they're very enlightening discussions and presentation. I'm very proud to be able to review this half century from a position of strength. Our progress in terms of economic growth has been described as remarkable by reliable institutions well placed to judge our progress. In the decade up to 2019, Bangladesh achieved 188% economic growth, and that not my numbers, it's by this British Spectre. And the century-old magazine, the Spectre, stated that Bangladesh achieved 188% economic growth, highest in the world, and significant reduction in poverty while integrating the principles of inclusion as a development priority. In the 70s, below poverty level was around 78%. Now it is around only 20.5%. This is a miracle. No wonder former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon termed it as a model of economic development, and Wall Street Journal called it a bottomless basket. Bangladesh is a standard bearer of the South. And it is a star of women empowerment and a leader in disaster preparedness measures. I'm equally proud to claim that we have done this while maintaining integrated political, social, and economic commitments and achievements, principles that were established by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of our nation, who committed to a development path in which nobody would be left behind. In today's world, we journey as part of the global community in a complex and fast-paced environment that some refers to a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Against this background, the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been outstanding. Her contributions to the nation by working with institutions such as the UN to help shape its agendas and deliver on millennium and also sustainable development goals have provided a framework for a whole of society approach in reducing poverty and providing a strong foundation for addressing our future development challenges. Today's speakers has elaborated on this infrastructure as critical to the local management of our sustainable development agendas, with a particular focus on achievements in poverty reduction through agriculture sector. Going forward, our perspective plan 2021 to 2041 reflects the central importance of Bangladesh's 4 institutional pillars: good governance, democratization, decentralization, and capacity building, as identified and informed in our national goals. These principles will continue to reform and strengthen our national and local control of our development agenda that is relevant to meeting Bangladesh economic and social targets and resiliency, and manage external and often unforeseen pressures. In achieving its goals to date, Bangladesh has effectively demonstrated the importance of multilateralism by engaging development partners to contribute to both the identification and redress of its development challenges. Our foreign policy is also consistent with this multilateral approach, founded on the principle of friendship to all, malice to none. We shall continue to demonstrate autonomy around our own development paths while engaging in mutually beneficial development strategies with development partners and respecting each other's agenda on economic, social and ecological approaches to growth and development. We also welcome the increasingly common acknowledgement of local agendas in the development process by development partners and the benefits of respectable collaboration in seeking efficiencies and optimization of the distribution of limited resources to achieve growth targets while addressing emergent and unpredictable growth challenges, including climate volatility, access to water, gainful employment of manpower, the Rohingya refugee problem, and the impact of COVID-19. Our progress in the last half decade has been built in the wake of many forms of crises. Bangladesh's achievements to date demonstrate that it has built resources and capability to leverage opportunities, adapt and grow even in adverse circumstances. It has become a land of opportunities, a vibrant economy. But we cannot be complacent, as still today, nearly 33 million people in Bangladesh live below the poverty level. And with development, we may face newer challenges, emerging problems. However, given our geopolitical situation, and we have a very determined leadership, we have the right leadership, and no wonder we can try to capitalize those opportunities and challenges. I would like to draw your attention to a page, just a comparative page, of some development statistics of Bangladesh. And this is just from in the 1970s and current data. And with this, is it possible we can show that to them? This is just a few numbers so that we can see how far we have moved around. And you can look at it. In 1972-73, just few data for your general, in 1972-73, our total budget was 786 crore in Bangladesh taka. And today it is 568,000 crore. 723 times increase in absolute terms. Just imagine the magnanimity, the dynamic changes it has happened. In the education budget in 1980, around 44 crore, and now we have 66,000 crore. And in poverty headcount, in the 70, this is just 1 year, the average was 78, but 73, 74, it was 82.9% below the poverty level. And now we have 20.5%. Currently, we have extreme poverty is around 10.5%. We propose to reduce by another 5% within the next 5 years. And by 2030, we would like to make it below 3%. Now, in life expectancy, in 1971, the average was 47. Now we have reached around this, how do we do? Now it's 72.6%. And right, and GDP growth rate. I did a study a few years ago, and that was just I did from 2 periods, 1975 to 1990, and then 1991 to 2006 at the time, basically to look into how how the military, quasi-military, or civil technocratic administration does in the development process, and how a political government, in spite of its skirmishes, a lot of problems, how they do well. And apparently, looking at the numbers, it is apparent that in a political government, growth, welfare is much higher. Anyway, just one number from here. GDP growth during 1975 to 1990, this 15-year period, on average, was 3.2%. Of course, in the last 10 years, it's around 6.8%. This is not a small achievement. It's a 3.2, and now 6.8 on average for the last few years. So this is a miracle. GDP per capita, I don't want to go, you have that number. And no wonder the foreign reserve has gone up. But here I would like to mention one issue, which was where it was in what did happen? Where's my that page? I had another page. I looked at the Pakistani situation. In the Pakistani situation, and that's a startling situation. And where is that? Unfortunately, what happened? The one area I like to draw your attention that when we got our independence from Pakistan, the longevity, the per capita income, everything was much superior in Pakistan vis-a-vis that of Bangladesh. But within the last few years, within the last 50 years, we made a big difference. And one of the key elements is women participation in the workforce, the education of women. In Pakistan, all those achievements are relatively much poorer, only because one of the main reasons is, besides non-political government, besides is also education of women. The education makes a big difference in the case of Bangladesh. Unfortunately, that page is missing, otherwise I would have shown you. Thank you so much. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for your analysis and deliberation on our keynote presentation. I must say that you are truly an academic in that, the deliberation. The data that you presented, much more rigorous than we three academic has presented in this session. Thank you very much, sir. Now I will invite Ambassador Mohammad Zamir to make a closing remarks. He's the former, career diplomat who has worked and as an ambassador in various countries in Europe, and as well as as a permanent representative to the Economic and Social Commission of Asia and the Pacific, FAO, World Food Programme, International Fund for Agricultural Development, European Communities, and also as Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Mohammad Zamir has been elected as a new member of OIC Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission based in Jeddah. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us, and invite you to deliver your talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Habib. It was wonderful listening to all these distinguished persons. And I particularly feel very involved because I had the great opportunity to work with Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur. I was a chef de cabinet for some time, and I had the great honor of receiving him in Claridge's Hotel when he came out from Pakistan and arrived in London. And before that, I was in the Pakistan Foreign Mission in Cairo, and my wife and myself, we had come over to London seeking our political asylum. But then when I came back to Dhaka on Bangabandhu's orders, he said that you must come and help me start the desk on India. And he arrived on the 10th of January from London via Delhi, and I arrived in Dhaka on the 21st of January 1972. And I still remember that he called me in Road 32, where he was staying, and said that you take over the desk of India and start the first file on India. And that's how it all started. But the interesting thing is, at that time, I had a very interesting discussion with first it was Jane Dixit, who was the Indian acting High Commissioner. But later on, there was Dr. Shumimol Dotto. And we were all discussing about the great difficulties the government was facing and the country was facing. And he said something very interesting, new High Commissioner Shumimol Dotto. He said, the glass is never half empty. You can call it half full or half empty, but it's never half empty. If you put a rose in the water and then you cover the glass, the rose will continue to live. And that's because there is oxygen in that area where you think it is empty. So today, when I was listening to all these very distinguished people and scholars, and also to our honorable foreign minister, I was reminded of that how Bangabandhu, I had written a whole piece. I have this whole piece which, because I write for various newspapers, I've written 27 books and all that, but it's totally material compared to what I've heard today. And to listen to all of you and your own practical experience, that has allowed me not to speak too much, because all of you have spoken and touched on points which are so important. And I must say that I have heard there's not a single factor where you have not covered or touched upon. The only thing I want to just put on one point, and draw your attention to that, is that if we need to move forward, we need to understand that we should have something more to do for our migrant population. We have, for example, from Bangladesh, we have nearly 8.5 million people working abroad as expatriate workers. And our government, present government, under the leadership of Honorable Sheikh Hasina, is trying its best to ensure that whoever came back is looked after, whoever wants to go back can go back. But as a person who has also been involved in various areas, I would like and appreciate very much if, for example, in order for us to move forward together interactively, through interactive engagement, we all decide to share the crisis which has been created by COVID and the pandemic, by not closing our doors, but by encouraging everyone to come, to share, and to move forward. Because if we can do that, that will make a large difference. Because if there is instability, there's discrimination. And if there's discrimination, there is unhappiness. And if there is unhappiness, you can't move forward. I was telling this the other day to someone who rang me up, because I write for quite a few newspapers, and some of that is also translated. It's printed in Italian in Corriere della Sera from Milan. It's printed in Le Monde from Paris. It's also printed in Al Haram in Cairo. And they brought it to my attention. They said that in order for any country to move through and move beyond at this point of time, on the pandemic, we need to have, as I pointed out, as this one small thing I'll just say, there has to be not only emphasis on education and good foreign policy, and we have heard about friendship for all and malice to none, and social justice, but equal opportunity. If we can arrange for equal opportunity, and we can arrange for specialization, and in that case, in terms of digitalization, we will see that we are moving forward with great dignity. So may I take this opportunity of saying that, for example, I've on the Rohingya situation, I've written a piece which will be coming out day after tomorrow in the Financial Express. I've said the stigma of the Myanmar election, and what is not happening should not happen there. And there are countries which are saying that we are neutral and we are going to help and do this, but it's not happening that way. And it's not enough to just, as our Honorable Foreign Minister has already pointed out very correctly, it's not that we want money to keep them. The thing is that they should be sent back, the Rohingya population should be sent back to Myanmar. They should feel that they should be able to go back safely and live there with dignity. That is what is required. And I had mentioned at one time, I mentioned it very clearly to the American ambassador who was visiting from Delhi. So the American ambassador in Dhaka had invited me to have dinner with him. And I said, it's very simple. If you want us to move forward proactively, we must understand that we must have equal opportunity. At the same time, we must show dignity and justice to everyone else. I've been to the various camps in Cox's Bazar, and I have been to Kutapalong camp and various other places. And I must admit that our Honorable Prime Minister has been more than kind in looking after them. But I would suggest that all of you who have spoken today, I would have liked if you had mentioned once that the idea of moving 100,000 of them to Bhasanchar, the island, should take place. Well, this is the first step. And then the second step would be that these people who have been cleared already by us and who have presented IDs and certificates that they are from Myanmar, they should be sent there on their way back to the Rakhine state. But for all of this, you need to say that, okay, we do not want a veto in the United Nations Security Council to stop that. What we want is equality of opportunity. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great honor for me to listen to all of you and for you to share your views. I'm particularly pleased that our Honorable Foreign Minister has very kindly come, and I feel very sorry he fell down and hurt his forehead while playing tennis. I had a long history of playing with his elder brother, Mohit Bhai, in Dhaka Club from 1969 and 68. And I once fell down as well in Dhaka Club. I don't know when he was playing, but I would suggest very strongly that have that tennis court cleaned first before you play again. That would be very important. We need you. We need you all the time. And may I say that please, this is something which I would mention. Please, I suggest that if you have any suggestions about what can be done to improve the Rohingya situation, you should speak out openly and tell China that stop only supporting Myanmar, and tell Russia that it's not enough to talk about things that you're going to do for others, but do it and show it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Zamir. Thank you. I really appreciate your insights. And in mentioning Honorable Foreign Minister, we are taking his advice, and we'll be coming up with a compiled, book as you advised, and under the leadership of Dr. Shami Ahmed. Sir, you are muted. Sir.
I think this would be really good, something very productive. And Shami, we will be working together. I would like to see that this get published. Very useful, presentation. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And our team from different part of the world, we have done the largest refugee studies in the world. We have interviewed 7,800 Rohingyas in the camp. And we actually, found out there were 25,000 deaths, 19,000 rape of Rohingya people. So, and I acknowledge, Mr. Kamul Hassan Tarofdar funding some of the projects that we are continuing. And thank you, everyone, for your remarkable speeches and analysis. Today's discussion reaffirms what IMF said about Bangladesh's macroeconomic performance has been remarkably steady. I appreciate the contribution to what has been a focused and valuable consideration of the driver and achievement of Bangladesh's success, as well as to provide insights to future challenges and Bangladesh's foundational legacy. Thank you, everyone. I will just end the program